All right, and we're recording. So tonight's guest is Alex Sansone of the Suited Shootist. And Alex, just thanks so much for coming on tonight.
I'm glad to be back, man. We had a hell of a time the first time, and then we were just chopping it up a little bit on primary and secondary a few weeks back. So yeah, this is starting to become a thing.
It really is. It's pretty awesome. I enjoy your company. And I'm
Likewise.
not the only one. I'm not the only one to enjoy your company. I did the stats. We just recently passed 1,000 plays, and guess whose name was on the at the very top of the top 10?
Well, yeah, I saw that, and all I can say is here's to low standards.
so, so you
But
have the
in all
honor.
seriousness, I'm glad people find it useful and engaging. So that's why I started out doing all this, and I'm glad that it's resonating with other people.
I think it resonates through the camera and through the voice as well. So, that was an easy decision. I You also have the distinction of being the so far the only guest that I've ever invited back. You're going to be the first of any of the repeat guests.
Oh,
So
fantastic.
yeah, pretty awesome stuff. I just greatly appreciate your time that you spend with us.
I mean, like I said, I'm more than happy to do it. You have had some very well established and renowned guests, so I certainly can't hold a candle to guys like Lee Weems and Brian Hill and Gabe White. Just to the those are the first that are sticking out. But I mean, you've had a veritable parade of very well established folks on the podcast so far. So I'm just flattered to be included in that group at all.
I'm just glad that they spend the time with me. Likewise with you. So thanks a bunch.
Yeah, man, always happy to.
So, um, can you tell us a little bit? So, whenever anybody comes on, whether it's their first
Mhm.
time or their second time or anything like that, I understand that they already have somewhat of a media presence. Like
Mhm.
most of these guests already done other interviews, and it gets boring for everybody involved when we trod back over previous ground. So I try to break new ground here.
Sure.
And let's think about going forward. Like, what kind of projects are you working on in the future?
So this is something that I had alluded to last time you had me on, was that I am in the works of developing my curriculum for what is going to be my sort of entry level gateway type classes. I was fortunate enough to have a few women kind of be the guinea pigs and beta test one block of it for me already. But it was one of those things where I've had enough people just approach me because they knew that I was the gun guy for either advice or guidance or some degree of instruction that that was actually one of the catalysts for going and taking the range master instructor development course. Was it's like, all right, if I'm going to be these only folks touch point into firearms instruction, which hopefully I'm not, then I need to make sure that I'm equipped to give them the best possible experience that I can, because that's what they deserve, and hopefully make it engaging enough that it will then encourage them to pursue continuing education. Because the entire point behind what I'm trying to do is basically kind of be feeder classes and almost create a farm team for my friends that are doing instruction, whether they are national traveling trainers or some of the local guys that are just teaching more conventional 1 or 2 day classes. And so this is the very dip your toe in the water, helping to kind of build the value and develop an understanding of why this kind of thing is necessary. Because I don't know how it is in Tennessee, but in Texas, um, the carry class is honestly kind of a joke, and there is never, well, I can't say never because I've only had to take the permit class twice. Uh, Not that I failed the first time; it was I took it and then got then renewal. Uh, but neither time was there ever any suggestion of, hey, there's more to it than this. And I really think that that does people a disservice.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. It's something that the better instructors try to emphasize. Um, what would be your ideal student in a curriculum like this?
So really the only criterion I have for an ideal student is somebody who is intellectually curious. Now, obviously, based on what it is that I'm putting together, the target demo are going to be people that are either unfamiliar with firearms, haven't really had any formal instruction, or people, might be that fall into that arena of gun agnostic, possibly gun curious, possibly gun apprehensive. Because again, that's the whole idea of what I'm trying to present is putting. You're familiar with Professor Yamane, right? Gun
Yes.
Culture 2.0. Yeah.
Yeah. Light over
One of
heat.
his taglines is great. That guns are normal and normal people have guns, which is a factual statement, but we also have to accept that to a very large percentage of the population, merely owning guns is out of the ordinary. And the concept of carrying them for personal protection is completely foreign. Some of that comes with prejudice and judgment. Some of it just seems excessively cautious to some people. And I'm okay with either. If they are approaching this with a degree of intellectual curiosity, I was like, why do people do that? Those are the ones that this material is really geared to answer those questions, because the one of the blocks, and kind of the way I've structured this, I just blatantly ripped off Carl Wren's sort of formula of 4-hour blocks that are compounding and kind of interlocking for two reasons. Number one is it makes it a lot more accessible for people, and then also it's less of a time commitment. And when I get to a point where I'm actually charging for this material, it's also going to be just less of a financial investment as well. So it's a whole lot easier of a pill for somebody to swallow 4 hours on a Saturday than giving up their whole weekend. But I guess the idea was that the self-defense class specifically, where the 4-hour block is geared not explicitly towards firearms, is helping people decide whether or not a gun is the right choice for them or not, and not making them feel bad if the answer is no.
Yeah, absolutely. I've had to tell people that a lot. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, because they'll make it through the permit class, for instance, right? Most of the
Mhm.
time, the first time you meet them is in the permit class. And, by the end of the permit class, they'll come to me sometimes in private and I'll be like, look, I don't know if I'm ready for this.
Mhm.
Well, the good thing about this country is that you don't have to be. Okay. Like
Right.
you're not forced to carry a gun. And if there's something inside of you that's saying that this isn't right for you, you should probably listen to that voice. So
Precisely. And even to a point of sort of embracing that, and I'm going to go so far as to say encouraging it, because if somebody is that self-aware that defensive firearms usage is not their thing, then that should be encouraged, and the other options out there should be made available and explored. Because again, uh, far too often you and I have both seen where it's like, oh well, I mean, if you don't carry a gun, then you're just part of the sheeple. And it's like, okay, there are people that are turned off to the idea of guns for all the wrong reasons, but belittling and mocking them ain't going to do anything to get them closer to our side. Now, obviously, you've got that bell curve, and the folks that are on the far fringe of it are never going to see things our way. So they are not the ones that are worth a majority of the effort. But you've got this whole middle section that doesn't really feel one way or the other about it, and they're waiting for somebody to come along and make a compelling argument as to why, as to what, as to how. And that's the whole idea is that it's that gateway to the options. And so TIFF and Ox Gateway Instructor class is definitely on my short list for precisely that reason.
absolutely. Yeah. Like if there's anybody that I want to learn gateway instruction from, it's definitely Ockentif.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely. So
And I mean, they even just sitting through their block at the tactical conference, they have it down to almost a science, and touching on aspects of it that as soon as you hear them address it, make perfect sense, but you wouldn't necessarily think about otherwise, like workflow.
Yeah. Who would have thought?
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about TechCon for a second. Okay.
Sure.
Yeah, like the first time I met you was at TechCon.
Mm-hmm.
How was it this year? And were there anything, or I should say, was there anything that you saw or did or felt that was different this year than it was about other years?
Um, so while this was the year that had the highest percentage of first time attendees, that wasn't glaringly obvious based on how people conducted themselves, which I think is a great indicator to the type of student that TechCon attracts. Um, it's, I mean, because while all of the material there is not, well, there's something there for everybody, regardless of skill level. Um, and that's the cool thing is that you can have Gabe White and me on the same line taking the same class, and both of us are going to get very different things out of it. But for a lot of it for me was kind of just very much a lot of the same. I almost go as much for just kind of the reunion and the social aspect of it as I do the material. Not that the material isn't valuable, because it absolutely is, especially when I'm not as much of a research geek as like Hearn or Lee Weems are, but my weaponized ADHD is such that I do enjoy going down a rabbit hole on some stuff just because it captures my attention. So some of that is, if nothing else, just kind of diverting for me. But this was an interesting year because it was the first year that my wife actually attended the conference itself, as opposed to just being a plus one for like the after hour social stuff. Um, and it was really interesting to get her perspective because we all know people who their spouse is the driving force behind their involvement in defense craft at large. And generally they are drug along kicking and screaming, and it's not a positive experience for them. They're a participant under duress. um, Now, last year at TACON, you met my wife, and you know that there is nothing that she is going to do that she don't want to do. And that's one of the things that I love about her, is that she is very independent and strong-willed that way. She calls me on my bullshit quite a bit, so it's not she doesn't let me get away with anything. But I overcorrected, and this was actually something that I kind of did a disservice to her, which was when she told me that she signed up. I'm like, okay, cool. I'm going to be completely hands off. This is your journey. This is your experience. You're going to get out of this what you want to get out of it. I am only going to insist that you attend Craig's experiential learning lab. Now, you can simply spectate. It's not required that you participate. I think that you would get value out of participating, but, don't feel like that's a requirement or an obligation. And I kind of left it at that. Well, problem is, after day one, um, she didn't have the best time. And that was my fault because um, I didn't give her enough guidance. And even with the breadth of material that's there, it's easy to find yourself in the wrong class where they're speaking English, but they ain't speaking English kind of stuff. Um, and towards the end of the first day, she and I actually sat in the same two lectures in the afternoon. The first one was Masad Ayub's Lessons from Recent Cases, where he particularly focused on disparity of force. That one she got a lot of mileage out of. But the one after that is kind of where she found herself underwater. And that was the the Hearn, Gelhaus, and Weems lecture on their favorite studies. And that is a very information dense lecture on a highly technical subject that, if it's not something that you are already familiarized with, um, it would be like me walking into one of the local universities here and plopping my ass down in a lecture of biochemistry. I just complete loss of whatever point they're trying to make, and it felt so overwhelming to her that she still felt like a bit of an outsider. Um, Now, this is where the community, the TACCON community at large, really deserves a shout out, because I'm fortunate enough to know quite a few of the kind of the prominent women in our space. We've got Annette Evans, Melody Lauer, uh, Jamie Meyer,
Yeah.
and so I'm sitting there with my wife, and I can tell there's something kind of visibly bugging her, and she's expressing this frustration, and Jamie just happens to walk by. I'm like, hey, um, I'm going to owe you a couple of drinks for this later, because I know I'm completely blindsiding you, but you're way better equipped at this than I am. So can you help her? Um, she absolutely did. And so she came back for day two. And at that point, she kind of linked up with Annette, and Annette was kind of her Sherpa for the rest of the weekend. And it was to a point that, when tickets dropped, I just look at it and go, hey, enrollment's open, or you doing this again next year? And it took very little thought on her part to say, yes, I want to go back. So that is absolutely nothing to do with my efforts, and everything to do with the TACCON community at large, and especially the contingent of women there that are working very hard to make this a more accessible community for other women.
I've only made it to TACCON a couple of times, and I've brought my
Mm-hmm.
wife every time.
Yeah.
And I've just been blessed to, to have a wife that actually, was interested in such things.
The cool thing is she has expressed a little bit more interest subsequently in. I mean, she's got her carry permit. She has her own carry pistol, but she's definitely kind of more of the fire extinguisher gun type of gun owner. Where typically the only time that she'll carry is like if she's going out of state to visit family, and I'm not going with her. So, not that she's not one of the ones where it's like I only carry a gun when I think I'm going to need it, but her risk analysis is different than ours. But the nice thing is I would suspect, I actually haven't talked to her about this, but I would venture that the continued curiosity stemmed not from her feeling like an outsider on day one, but very much more feeling more included on days 2 and 3.
Yeah, that's very important. It's always scary to, not just travel. You didn't have to travel so far, but
Yeah, thankfully not.
but for the rest of the folks that, that end up traveling, some of these guys are traveling halfway across the country to hang out with a bunch of strangers.
Yeah. And I mean, the plus side is, there were a lot of the faces that she already knew, because she had been pretty much ever since it had been in Dallas. She'd come along, and she would just either go and hang out with friends in Dallas, or go up to like hang out in the casino in Oklahoma during the day, and then just link up afterwards. And so, she knows, like, the ShivWorks crew loves her. No surprise, everybody does. But like Cecil Birch especially, and then a lot of our mutual friends are. So it was a lot of known faces. It was just the material was still a little bit alien.
Yeah. So one thing that my wife really appreciated was that, she didn't have to fire a single shot. And she's an academic herself. She spent 9
Mm-hmm.
years working for U of M, University of Memphis.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew that I chose the right one when not only was she the same sorority as my mother, they're both Sigma Gamma Rhos, but also she got her PhD for free. But she found out that if she worked for the school, they pay for her schooling.
Brilliant.
And I was absolutely brilliant. So, speaking of school, I know you also made it to a Tom Givens class. Was that
Yes, I
the
did.
Rangemaster instructor course?
hmm
So how did you like that? How was that for you?
It was great. I had only had very limited interaction with Tom previously. I took a 4-hour shotgun block from him at the TACCon in 19 in New Orleans. And then aside from that, our interaction had really just been sort of casually crossing paths at the tactical conference in the subsequent years. But it was really emphasized to me. Um, Actually, it was Craig Douglas who made the observations like, "Hey, look, um, you need to train with Tom sooner rather than later." And so it's like, well, okay, hey, how about that? He's teaching at Carl Wren's place. Okay, cool. Let's sign up for that.
Yeah.
And like, I will say that the Tom Givens that you hear on like Lee Weems's podcast or those 100% exactly the same dude. And it just very much the consummate professional. The classroom material was fantastic, and it astonished me how, I mean, dude's got the whole thing down to a science. And you figure when you've got the flight hours logged that he does, um, you would expect nothing less than that degree of mastery. But I will say that if you have never taken a class from him, um, just be prepared for a very vigorous tempo the whole day. He is very diligent about his time management, um, and he does not he does not suffer people that don't take it seriously. Now, thankfully, there was nobody like that in our class by any stretch of the imagination. Like, we didn't have that guy, which again I think is a testament to the type of student that he attracts. Um, some folks were not necessarily prepared for exactly how uh, regimented his live fire is. And so, the whole every single magazine you own for the pistol should be completely loaded, and you should have either a pocket or a dump pouch full of loose rounds. Happily, that's just been my habit for live fire, you know, for the last at least several years. Um, my logic was like, I paid to hear this guy talk. And for as fond as I am of my fellow students, and the cool thing was in this particular class, I knew was probably a third of the people there. Um, so, but it's like, yeah, I can talk to you guys whenever I want to hear this guy. So, it's just making sure that you're not wasting time. And he doesn't pull any punches on that. But he's not cruel, but he also doesn't tolerate bullshit. No.
That's kind of a breath of fresh air.
Mm-hmm.
That's nice. When you go to a class like that, how do you dress? Is it different from the way you normally dress out in town, or do you have how was it?
It kind of depends, and it depends specifically on what my goals are for the class. Now, I will say that my dress did not really deviate all that much from how I typically dress, except for the fact that I've got some dedicated range wear for two reasons. Number one, um, constantly clearing a cover garment wears holes in your shirts a lot faster sometimes than just carrying the gun around does. And I'm not going to do that with my really nice high-end Italian stuff.
Yeah.
But in the same vein, while I'm not going to go to a class like that in a gamer rig, I'm going to game it to the extent that I reasonably can, insofar as I'm not going to wear clothing that is going to overly complicate things. So I was wearing just like jeans and boots and a t-shirt. Um, I don't generally wear t-shirts a lot. This is normally how I dress. But the reality of it is that when you're talking about woven fabrics like dress shirts, they don't stretch. So when it comes to actually drawing a pistol on the clock under evaluation, that can be a hindrance. Now, like when I shot TacCon, um, all 3 days I had just button down shirts that I was wearing. So I'll modulate the wardrobe a little bit depending, but if I'm going to something that, and not to say that the Rangemaster class is a technical shooting class, because I would be willing to venture that the justification for most of the live fire training that exists within that curriculum that's not evaluated, that's not like scored for your grade, is less there for the shooter and more than it is for the other line that's doing the coaching. In order to coach, you need to have somebody shooting. So it's just a theory, but uh, anyways, point being is that for the most part, I mean, I didn't change anything drastically, but I gamed it a little bit. And yeah, I was wearing stretchy t-shirts as opposed to button downs because that's less likely to cause me problems. And the nice thing is that um, I can wear a large or an XL depending. The nice thing about a large, at least in the cuts and the ones that I wear, is once you get that cover garment up, because they were still elastic enough, when I let it go, it kind of stayed there. It didn't really fall back down and get in the way. So little details like that, but I don't have such a vastly different wardrobe for training than I do for normal day-to-day life.
Yeah. I kind of I kind of agree with that mentality there. Um, Sometimes folks will ask, like, "Hey, should I bring the exact gun that I carry every day, or should I bring this other gun that I'm more comfortable with, that I shoot better, and that I just feel like would increase my chances of success?" And my usual answer is, if it's going to increase your chances of success and it's going to help you to remember the lessons that are being learned in the class, then yeah, bring the bigger gun. And
Yeah,
I kind of see this
and
as the same thing.
and that's actually a great example because so right now I'm probably going to send my second Glock over to Bennett Borsight so that way I then have an actual match set. Uh, because right now I've got one Borsight Glock, and just recently I got stupid lucky, and somebody was selling a Borsight 365 frame with the Filster mod that I picked up on the secondary market for like I stole the thing. It was a screaming deal. So now the closest thing I've got to a match set is a Glock 19 and a Sig 365. So handling wise, they are similar. Um, I need to actually get a few more drills on the clock with the 365 to get a sense of what my performance delta actually is between the two. But mostly because I didn't feel like chambering and unchambering a hollow point and, repeatedly to the point where I was going to wind up throwing away a few HSTs by the end of the weekend. I just actually carried the 365 as my defensive firearm. And then when I got to the range, I would just put on the Glock 19 for whatever shooting we were doing during the course of the day, and then reverse that process at the end of the day. Now, there are those people that will argue that that's gaming the system, and to a degree, yeah, it is. Um, I don't think that it is such an egregious delta that it is dishonest. Would I have shot it as well with the 365? No, probably not. But given the fact that I shot what a 95, 96% on the range master, I don't necessarily think that it would have had an appreciable difference. I don't think it would have kept me from passing. I'll put it that way. And you know what? Thank you. That's some content. I'm going to test that theory sometime in the next month or two. I'll actually run the Ranger Master qualification with my 365 to see what happens.
I see a lot of guys do that. Like, what'll happen is they'll go to class, and yeah, it'll be a different gun with a different wardrobe and different gear. Okay, cool. Write down the drills, and then on their home range, they can go home and test it out with their actual carry gear just to see what it is.
Yeah.
Even then, that's not really, you don't really do it a whole lot because you don't want the extra miles on your carry gear.
Hmm.
But it's just something.
Yeah. And, it's one of those things where I'm comfortable enough in my shooting ability at this point. The only other data point that I have is one of the things I do on the side is a little bit of freelance writing for Gat Daily. And I've got a friend of mine who is is one of the sales reps for Tissus, which is an importer of Turkish firearms. And I don't think it's gone live yet, but I did a review of the Stingray, which is their single stack 9mm 1911, like their combat commander style pistol. And since I don't have a holster for the thing, I'm like, all right, well, what can I shoot that's a useful benchmark? And I shot a super test with it. And I shot like a 260 something with it. There was less than a 10-point difference between shooting it with the Stingray with iron sights and my Gucci'd out Glock with a red dot. So I'm like, yeah, I'm good with that. It's a out of 300. You're talking about a literally less than 3% difference. I'm okay with that. So
Yeah, you're gonna be just fine.
yeah.
So,
And that's I think one thing that too many people get hung up on is that just like John Correa likes to say, what gets measured gets worked on, which is absolutely true. But I think it's to a detriment with some people. Is just because something is measurably different doesn't mean it's significantly different.
yeah, I agree. I think that's the truth. So, absolutely. I mean, dadgum, just with the pedigree of people that you train with yourself. I mean, if you're hanging around like, the Shipworks Collective and the Rangemaster crew, come on. Seriously, like, are you really in that big of a trouble? No, you're gonna be fine.
Well, and that's the other part that people aren't really comfortable with is you're never going to know until it's too late.
True. That's true.
Whether you were good enough on that day, whether your gear was optimized or not, you're only going to know when all is said and done. And you know what? At the end of the day, if you were wrong, it ain't your problem anymore.
Yeah. So, there's a question that we see all the time, and I'd like to hear your perspective.
Sure.
Should you dress around the gun, or, or should you wear something that fits your wardrobe, like maybe something tiny? And when is it appropriate to do either? I know you
Hmm.
probably touched on this on a lot of your content. You might have a
Yeah.
video or two, but I wonder if now that you've, taken the Rangemaster curriculum and you just came back from TacCon, I wonder if you hold any of those same opinions.
Well, it's going to depend, which is always the kind of the cop out answer, but it really does. If to the extent that somebody's lifestyle, their professional and social demands are such that they have the luxury of carrying a full-size duty pistol with a red dot and a spare mag and a flashlight and all this other jazz. If they are able to do that with or without accommodation specifically for that gear, cool, rock on, more power to them. The reason why I am so vehemently against the concept of dressing around the gun is less about the concept itself and more about how it's treated, because generally I see it used as this eraser phrase of, oh, well, so here's the challenge, especially these days. More people are coming to concealed carry specifically, which is what dress around the gun pertains to, later and later in life. My mother, who is years old, got her carry permit within the last 5 years. So, how are you going to tell somebody with 50 plus years of adult life experience that all of that is wrong And what they need to do is overhaul all of that to accommodate this piece of gear. There are some people that just dive in, full on and are committed to, all right, whatever it takes, I'll make this work and everything else be damned. I will make the firearm the nucleus of everything. And if they've got the ability to do that, cool. The problem that I have with the concept of dressing around the gun is that what it tends to communicate to people is, if you are unable or unwilling to make the firearm the focal point of everything, then you don't take your personal protection seriously. You are not worthy of the time or respect of the people in this space, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so my issue is really that it tends to be used in this either very dismissive or very elitist kind of application. And are there considerations that have to be made when you're accommodating a firearm or any other defensive tools into your wardrobe? Yes, absolutely. But it really should be a little bit more symbiotic in finding a balance of the two, as opposed to just, wear oversized clothes, yada, yada, yada. I mean, a great example was in a Facebook group of, it's generally considered to be a fairly high information group. Somebody had posted, they're like, hey, used to be a cop. Now I'm doing, a regular earth person day job. And I'm trying to, it wasn't even anything super complicated. They were just looking for tuckable holster options because their job necessitated that they wear a tucked in polo shirt. And like no fewer than 3 people said, just untuck your shirt. It's like, that's not an option. Like, this is a professional dress code thing. It's as tone deaf as like, oh, you can't carry at work? Cool. Just quit your job and find someplace you can carry. Well,
I've heard that.
It's not that easy. It's not that easy for everybody. And so it's that kind of very, sometimes I feel like I overuse the word myopic, but it's the case. It's so narrow minded that it's like, if that were an option, then obviously that's, and the reality is it's not relegated just to the gun space. Like, home improvement group that I'm in, the range that we bought when we moved into this house like 6.5 years ago, the knobs have gotten to a point where the little plastic collar that holds the knob onto the actual stem of the range, because they're plastic, they started cracking and they're not actually working anymore. And so I threw up a question like, hey, what is your preferred source for appliance parts? 2 jackasses told me to buy a 3D printer. I'm like, instead of buying an $8 part, you want me to buy this $300 thing? Hey, come on. That's the extent of it. Is, sometimes people offer seemingly simple but just completely useless solutions. And I think sometimes, I don't know, I suspect that social media has contributed to this, because everybody obviously, is the hero of their own story, but they are so desperate to feel useful that they lose sight of whether they're actually helping or not.
I agree. I think so. And social media has a way of echo chambering people.
Yeah, it does. And, that's the other challenge, is that it silos people into echo chambers. But then whenever you come up against valid critique, like the Filster Workshop has been accused of fostering an echo chamber. It's like, no, it's not an echo chamber. It's just anti-dumb advice. It's like, and if you're suggesting something that's either dangerous or illegal, you're going to get checked. And if you double down on it, then yeah, it's nap time for you. But, I was like, no, I'm somebody of value and I deserve to be listened to and respected. And I was like, are you though? Yeah. Suggesting somebody just carry at work and consequences be damned, or, free men don't ask permission. Well, that's not really fucking helpful.
No, it's not. Absolutely not. So let's see. Another question that I have. Steadily, I've been upgrading my wardrobe little by little.
Uh-huh.
Bought some boots, getting better clothes, wearing better, better colored
Mhm.
shirts, things like that. Um, what advice can you give to guys like me and to our listeners to incrementally step up our wardrobe?
Sure.
Um,
There's a couple of things. Um, First off, don't try and overhaul everything all at once for a couple of different reasons. Number one, it's financially prohibitive. Secondarily, unless if you have a very strong sense of who you are as a person, it's typically a little bit easier to find clothing that feels authentic. Um, if you struggle with that, then kind of a hack that I like is what I can't remember if I heard this from somebody or not, but basically the idea being is find yourself what I call a style doppelganger. And that is everybody has had that conversation of, hey, you know that you look like this famous person? Punch that famous person into Google, go to the images tab. If they are any flavor of public figure, if they spend any time on camera, they have a small team of stylists, a whole bunch of fashion and aesthetic nerds. The express purpose of them is to make sure this person looks good on camera. Now, if you are only seeing, for example, red carpet photos from like the the Met Gala, that's some outlandish crap. None of us can get away with wearing that at anything other than a gala. But uh, a great example is um, a fairly well-known name within the style space is a gentleman by the name of Tom Ford. He has his own clothing line. He actually used to work over at Gucci as well. And he has two very iconic looks. One of them is a jet black suit, typically with very broad peak lapels and a white dress shirt undone down to here, um, or with like a massive velvet bow tie. And that is a very particular aesthetic. But when you see him traveling, he wears a lot of denim. It's a lot more rugged. He'll throw some turquoise and have a little bit of Southwest flair in there, and it's nothing that I think anybody would look at and consider to be really overly dressy, but it looks thoughtful and well put together. So that brings it to kind of the other piece of this, which is that what I call style icons. And that's actually one of the questions when people join into the Bespoke Solutions Facebook group is, who are your style icons? And the idea there is it can be either a celebrity or a character who you just dig the way they dress. You may not know why, but you see them on screen, you go, I like that. And that at least gives you a starting point for you to kind of dissect and understand what the elements are, what about it resonates with you, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So those I think can be very useful tools. Generally, what I recommend when somebody is upgrading their existing wardrobe is, look at what they wear the most, upgrade those items first, and generally speaking, spend the most money on what you wear the most because you want to get that cost per wear down as much as possible. So, I mean, jeans are a fantastic example. There's not a single dude on the planet that doesn't have at least several pair worth of jeans. And something as simple as going from a relaxed fit to a straight fit, even if it's the exact same brand, that alone can have a staggering impact on just how they look on you, because the way clothing fits on the body will impact what the proportions look like. And anybody that has spent any amount of time around me, either in person or on Facebook, knows that I'm very much on the crusade against cargo shorts. There's a reason for it, and it's not just like a principles thing. So, in order for cargo shorts to actually be useful, number one, the cargo pocket has to sit several inches down the leg from the hip pocket so that the space that it occupies when it's actually being used isn't the same. So that immediately necessitates that the overall inseam is either at or below the knee. That's a problem because what that ends up doing is it makes dudes' legs look short and stumpy. The other part is, in order for those pockets to be useful, the leg has to be a very full cut. That makes dudes' legs look skinny. And from the knee down, just naturally is the skinniest portion of your leg anyways. Like, Nick Delgadillo, if you're familiar with him, he's a starting strength coach. He's also kind of ShivWorks adjacent. He's a strong dude. But there is a dramatic difference between how big he is at the calf versus how big he is at the quad and the hamstring. And so if you're wearing shorts that cover up the most visible, the most aesthetically impressive portion of your leg, to where all you've got is calf and ankle, it creates a very challenging silhouette, and it almost makes you look like from Deadpool 2 when he gets cut off at the waist, and then his he's got the baby legs regenerating.
That's pretty.
But I mean, there's a certain degree of actual math and science to this, and the cool thing is that with tailor, and anytime you talk about tailoring, people immediately think it goes to suits, which are generally the most intensive example of tailoring. But anything can be tailored. A pair of swim trunks can be tailored. And so it's just a matter of making sure that what you're wearing accentuates the proportions that you want to accentuate, downplays the proportions that you don't, etc. And so another great example of this was that post that I shared in Bespoke Solutions the other day of the custom clothier who had the dude come in, just based on his overall, build and physique. It looked like he had Down syndrome. But that is a very challenging build to tailor to, because the dude was only 48 inches tall. He was barrel chested. He had something like a 42 or a 44 inch chest. No real neck to speak of. I mean, just from the ears down was straight. And none of that is said in any kind of mocking or pejorative fashion. But the reality is that those are very challenging proportions to work with. But because of how his clothing was tailored to fit him, it created a very flattering silhouette that wouldn't necessarily exist if he was wearing a 3X t-shirt and a pair of cargo shorts. And so, the real challenge is, more than anything, interestingly enough, it's a lot like people that are resistant to coming into the gun space. If the individual doesn't care or doesn't see value, then they're not going to make the effort. And there's a lot of dudes that are resistant to putting any real effort into what they wear. They're still wearing the same crap that they did in college. And it's predominantly because it's easy. Doesn't require any thought. Cargo shorts, graphic t-shirts, and either, Asics, New Balance, or Hey Dudes. And, they're ready to roll out the door. But I would be willing to venture that if they had just the formula of, okay, doing X, Y, Z instead, that didn't require a whole bunch of thought or effort, and if they had ready access to the actual clothing solutions, they would be a lot less resistant to the idea. But the fact that it takes some time, some effort, and some homework is not necessarily something that they want to invest in, which is, again, it's a free country. You can do whatever you want to do. And I don't I'm not particularly invested in somebody's choice one way or the other, but just rejecting the idea that how you dress matters, it just isn't the case. So the other part of it is that, and this was something I think that we talked about when you were the guest on my live stream, is once you wear clothing that actually fits you properly, there's this intangible, it just makes you feel better. And it doesn't matter where you are physically. You could be an Adonis, you could be, rocking the dad bod, anywhere in between, but there's something about well-fitting clothing, especially well-made, well-fitting clothing, that just puts a little bit more swagger in your step. It boosts your confidence a little bit. And, I would be curious to know how many of the oversized t-shirt and cargo pant wearing crowd actually feels good about what they're wearing versus it just being the path of least resistance.
Yeah.
I don't know. I have my suspicions, but however, that's deviating away from the initial question. So if guys are trying to improve their wardrobe and they're in the early stages of it, a couple of easy things. Leather shoes. Doesn't matter whether it's a sneaker, whether it's a boot. I mean, I'm wearing just some, driving moccasins right now. These are actually Duluth driving mocks. They're not bad. But, leather shoes or like actual canvas shoes instead of like athletic sneakers. There's a few things where unless you are actively engaged in physical athletic activity, you should not be wearing tennis shoes. And honestly, you really should be wearing a smartwatch.
I agree. I
You know,
agree.
and
Yeah.
no, those are the only two. Like you can wear Lululemon or like honestly, athleisure stuff is not necessarily a bad way to go. It's a decent entry level for some folks. It helps if you actually have a build that looks like you work out. But again, if it fits properly, there have been times where I've been just kind of knocking around the, maybe 2 mile radius of my house, whether it's going to the dance studio or running errands or whatever, and I'm wearing like joggers and a zip up hoodie, but it fits me. I'm not swimming in fabric. So, generally though, I prefer to, my thing with wearing collared shirts is actually, John Hearn's well-dressed gunman thing is definitely a validating factor. But for me, honestly, it's purely aesthetic, because like if I have a collar that comes up around my neck, I've got a very short neck and very round features. And so having anything that cuts me off here makes me look rounder. Whereas having something open collar elongates everything a little bit to where it's a little more flattering. And I like the way I look better in that.
Yeah. Yeah. Keep that instead of the whole like collar all the way up. That doesn't even look good.
Well, but like it's also why I typically don't wear crew neck t-shirts either. Same thing. And the irony being is that since I really started down the path of geeking out about men's style, and especially when I started shopping like consignment and secondhand, it's really easy for me to impulse buy neckties, because I can typically spot the really well-made ones that are not priced nearly as high as they should be, because the folks at the consignment shop don't know what they, unless it's like Hermes or some really well-known brand. I was buying Neapolitan-made, Italian-made 7-fold ties, which have probably 2 to 3 times the amount of silk in them as even something like Hermes, for like $30 and $50, and these are like $200 and $300 neckties. Because I know what 7-fold means on the label, but a lot of people don't, and so it's those little deals. But that's the other part about it, is if you do a little bit of homework, you don't have to spend more than you would going to like J.C. Penney or Macy's. You can just get something of dramatically higher quality. An example that I'll use was the Easter photo that I put up where I was wearing that lavender window pane sports jacket. Um, I think I paid $200 for that, which I mean is not an insignificant amount of money, but that's about what you'll pay for a sports jacket at any major menswear store. But this is handmade from an Italian manufacturer that nobody's ever heard of, but the quality of the fabric is better, the construction is better. So, you know, those are the considerations. But it's something that I geek out on and that I actually enjoy. And I'm also enough of a collector just in general that that's kind of where I've settled. Like I collect watches to an extent, but my wardrobe has really kind of become my collection outside of like I kind of treat training the same way where at this point I kind of treat instructors like Pokemon. But and what's interesting is what kind of got me on that was my very first pistol class ever was tactical responses fighting pistol. And at the end of it, James Yeager actually made the point of uh, announcing to his class, like, look, if any of y'all are ever involved in a defensive encounter, I will fly out to you and I will stand as an expert witness for your defense. Like, huh, okay. I didn't know that was an option. Cool. Good to know.
Yeah, that's legit. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
So, wow. I'm looking at the time, and the time that you see on the screen, that you and I see on the screen, the viewers are
Mm-hmm.
not going to see on the screen.
Sure.
It's a little bit different than what's actually there
Yeah.
because of the
I don't
technical
have any
issue.
hard stops. So if you want to keep rolling, we certainly can. But I know that you have a wife and child to get back to. So, thankfully, all of the small creatures that I'm responsible for feeding are currently in crates, so they don't require as much attention.
Yeah, but I'll tell you what. Like right now, it's looking like about an hour, and
Mhm.
Alex, this just flew by. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Likewise, man.
Wow. Yeah. Um, so can you tell us a little bit about where we could find you if we have questions? How can we
Absolutely.
reach you?
Yeah. So the best place to find me is the Suited Shootist. That is on Instagram. That is on Facebook. That is on YouTube. That is also on TikTok. I really need to work on putting out more content there. Um, I was dragged kicking and screaming onto the platform, but it has been uh, it's been a little bit worthwhile. I also do have a Patreon. You are one of my patron members. Thank you for that, sir. And we've got a dedicated Discord. We've got obviously our Patreon page. There are some special discounts that are available for patrons only that I've got in the works. And that is also probably the most cost effective way to get some individual style consultation at the black tie level. So, if that is something that folks want and, that's an option at their disposal. Speaking of clothing, I also am a custom clothier here in Houston, Texas. So if anybody is in the market for some new threads, they are always more than welcome to hit me up. It is an in-person thing. I can't do fittings remotely, but we can always get you set up. And it's everything from denim to tuxedos and everything in between. So other than that, yeah, like I said, the actual curriculum is not live yet. That's probably it's still in the works of getting everything hammered out. But that'll probably be something that is going to launch maybe tail end of this year or beginning of next. Really just depends on. I feel like in order to do it true justice, I need to get some time with Tiff and Ock, and then with Brian Hill as well first.
Those would be fantastic places to start. Oh my gosh. Yeah, definitely. So, yeah, I mean, Alex, this right here is fantastic. I'm going to make sure that all these links and stuff are put into the description of the video. That way, wherever our listeners go or wherever our viewers go to watch this, it will be in the description. So feel free to reach out to Alex at the Suited Shootist. Is there anything I didn't cover? Like any questions that I should have asked, but you still feel led to talk about?
No, man, you always do pretty thorough prep work on these. So, I figure if nothing else, something will come to us after the fact, and it'll be an excuse for a third one.
Yeah, this is true. Yeah, that'd be fantastic. Alex, thanks again for coming on. Man, I really appreciate you.
Man, appreciate you having me as always. So happy to help.
Right on. Thanks again. And folks, if you're listening or if you're watching, I understand how precious your time is. Uh, we really appreciate you spending that time with us. I greatly appreciate it. Folks, thanks for coming. Welcome to Memphis.